Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I'd like to read a brief statement. Eastern Promise congratulates Liz Truss after she accepted Her Majesty the Queen's invitation to form a government and thus became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Interesting fact. Ms Truss becomes only the second Prime Minister to represent a constituency in the east of England. The other one being, any guesses? Sir John Major, who was MP for Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. Oh. Whatever your politics, we wish Liz Truss well, as these are extremely difficult times. And if she's ever in any doubt about where to turn for good news and tempered optimism, Liz Truss needs only to remember 6 words. Greetings and welcome to Eastern Promise. I'm Mike Rigby, and on Eastern Promise this week we rejoin Chris Sargisson, now CEO of Thetford CAB, as he looks to the future after 5 years at the helm of the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. We talk about the importance of the CAB. Chris buys me a beer, and he also turns the tables on the interview, so the interrogator becomes the interrogated. And that's very far from being all, because I talk to Thomas Panton, co-founder of the sustainable shopping platform GreenR. Having announced a crowdfunding campaign just this week, this is the perfect time to hear about the GreenR journey directly from Thomas. And finally, beguiling you with its sights, sounds and many, many smells, we look at the top natural beauty spots in the east of England, as chosen by you in this week's CROWDSOURCERY. Apologies to Chris Sargisson. That was not Chris's band, the Voodoo Vultures. That was The Instants. Instant what? I don't know. Pot noodle, I presume. Sorry, Chris. I couldn't resist. Earlier this year, Chris Sargisson completed a 5-year term as the CEO of Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. As Chris took his huge array of skills into the charity sector, namely Thetford Citizens Advice Bureau, I wanted to get his view from the summit, as it were, as well as to hear about his next moves. If you're yet to hear part 1 of my chat with Chris, go immediately either to your podcast service of choice or to easternpromise.podbean.com and search out Chris Sargisson. Now, let's rejoin Chris and myself at the Unthank Arms in Norwich. Other fine drinking establishments are available all across the east of England. So you now, as we've probably before mentioned, Disson District CAB. What? I mean, it seems a fairly obvious question, but what's drawing you there?
So I am a product of CAB. I wouldn't be talking to you now if I hadn't been to see them when I was 16 years old. And so I'm eternally grateful for the advice that they gave me and the path they put me on at that time. My experience with the Chambers of Commerce has opened me to a lot of charities. I met some amazing people that work in those charities, and I'm always massively impressed and inspired by what they do, which again, it sounds like words that you'd expect me to say, but it's completely...
No, I do get it. I absolutely get it.
Genuine. Yeah. And so there's a connection there and there's an understanding there. But I think in some respects, the last 5 years are relevant to the next 2 or 3 years with the CAB. They are an extremely important charity in the ecosystem of providing support. They do it for free. It's amazing how few people know they're a charity. They take an approach to support which is a bit like going to your doctor with a pain and he doesn't fix the pain, he kind of gets to the understanding as to why that pain is there and what other things are going on in your life that maybe have caused that. So they take a very holistic view of all the aspects, and they don't just do one thing and you're out the other side. They work with people to try and fix a number of things in their lives and move their lives forward. They are stretched in terms of the amount of activity that they're building, having to do day to day, particularly in light of energy crisis and people needing more support, not less. And their funds are becoming harder to acquire. As funding through the usual sort of government portals become more internalised and less available. So it's a case of the classic disruption. I don't need to do what they do. What I need to do is enable them to be able to do more of what they do. And try and bring to that organisation a level of experience that will open up more people to be interested in being supportive either through fundraising or through volunteering. Because they are a volunteer organisation predominantly, and they need a wide range of skills and expertise across the board, across the range, but need to explain why that's interesting and what the outcomes are. There was my first day, this is day 7, my first day through the door, there was a lady who was expressing her gratitude to someone that she's spoken to over a number of weeks, and she used this amazing summary of what had happened. She said, I came in here with nothing, and I thought I have nothing, but now I don't have nothing, I have you. So you just think, right,
lovely.
How can I do more of that? So how can I enable more of that? So I'm going to work with them for 3 days in the working week, and then I'm going to blow the dust off the consultancy business and focus on that sort of transitional work, that brand and culture and narrative and growth bits that we've been doing, and try and be useful to other businesses and stay annoyingly like a sort of whingy toddler in the corner of the room with the Chamber of Commerce going, I think you should do this, until Nova goes, will you go away?
Yes.
It's done. It's finished. Move on.
Eject that man.
So try and get that T-shirt innovation bit moving forward.
Yes. Can you just reflect for me on the business community at its various levels has sort of various organisations, the Chamber being one. Obviously, each county has its own chamber. You've got Federation of Small Businesses, you've got Institute of Directors, you've got Confederation of British Industry. You know, how does that all work together, I suppose? Let's go for the simplest term. I'm sort of, you can't see this, listener, but I'm sort of turning my hands as if to indicate a clock or cogs.
More like you are entering the Rubik's Cube Championship.
Yes. Well, that's unlikely.
And you're warming up.
Yes, the Rubik's Cube Champions, again, very unlikely. But so how does that? Did you sort of focus on, we'll engage, but we'll stay focused on what we're doing, or is that always kind of something you take on a case by case?
So day one, absolutely day one, I took the view and made it very clear day one that any entity that is setting its stall out to be supportive of anybody in business should get our support. We're all trying to do the same thing. What we have to do is be clear on our differentiator. What elements of it that we might do well and thoroughly, whereas others will perhaps do other aspects in a different way more thoroughly. So the Institute of Directors is a good example, very focused on the individual directors and their development and their training and their expertise. The FSB is a very good example of organisations of a certain size, Federation of Small Business, that have very much a sort of daily challenge and a back office function around legal support and legal aid and access to sort of services which they can tap into in and out when they need them. The compelling difference, and there are a number of examples, I think, where an organisation should have a bit of each one if it needs it, or potentially only sort of use the services of one if it's necessary at that time. So always work collaboratively, particularly with those that are trying to do the same thing as you, because you share the same stories and you share the same purpose and you share the same values, but you do have a differentiator. That's why there's a Sainsbury's and a Waitrose and a Tesco and an Aldi. Yeah, I'll have another one of those, please.
That's a
Mosaic. Yeah.
Could I go ship, please?
Thank you. Proofreader, listener, that we are absolutely in a pub.
Yes, absolutely. This is not... I do like occasionally to fake things for comic effect. Well, I say comic effect, but this is absolutely genuine.
Yeah. The differentiator that I firmly believe is the positivity of the Chamber is that we're actually one of the few organisations, possibly the only organisation, that actually has feet on the ground. So we're the only one that actually employs people to be in those communities, to be a point of contact from the point of view of, I mean, there are management structures within others, but we convert our income straight back into payroll. So we want to be, that's why we're trying to be everywhere to be helpful and to be supportive. So you go as much through an individual as through other people that, rather than being member to, not rather than being, but so it's not just member to member. So the IOD, and I've worked with the IOD and I've been a member of the IOD, uses its IOD members to create structures that support the wider membership, which is brilliant. What the Chamber can do is it can actually put feet on the ground, and it can create things like debates and conferences and small meetups on a regular basis. Oh, what a superstar!
Thank you very much.
I mean, that's a real generalisation, and there are other similarities and what have you. But that ability to apply feet on the ground as a tour de force has meant that we've been able to try and be as useful and as helpful and as engaging by actually being face to face with individuals and organisations, as well as create structures like different groups and connects and what have you that members then be part of. So its growth is matched by that, because we're a non-for-profit, or I could say we. I'm not CEO anymore. It's a non-for-profit, so you can convert your revenues into that feet on the ground behaviour rather than sort of build something, some other structure around the edges that is perhaps more valuable to you as an organisation, but not necessarily to the people that are paying. So it's matching that business need and matching that energy. But the ecosystem, I think, works very well. I think businesses are very, very adaptable and very clear on what is the best fit for them at that particular time. And my suggestion always is I use a combination of those support mechanisms that suits you and your need at that particular time. So if you need an organisation that actually wants to be involved in what you're doing and working with you one-on-one, that's where the Chamber is very strong. If you need a sort of insurance policy approach, more or less, or a collective sort of group, then there are better options for that than us.
Yeah, I mean, talking about sort of the business support out there, I do need to obviously I want to make mention of the New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership. I was at the Digitech factory at City College on Monday, and they were so involved in getting that off the ground. Likewise, the Condimentum plant at the Food Enterprise Park. Chris Sargisson very kindly reminded me of the work they did there. And you are on the board of the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor. You're looking very expectantly at me to say, come on, you can do it. What? You can do it. Find the word. You're on the board of the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor. And there was, just this afternoon, I've had people, at a business meeting earlier, I've had people mentioning that to me. And what was it about that, what is it about the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor that makes it such a special proposition, a strong brand that people tap into?
There's a couple of things in that, and that's, again, one of the real privileges, I think, of being part of being in that chief exec role, is that you are invited to to support ideas and innovations that those enabling organisations like the LEP and the local authorities put their energy into as well. And what I've always been very careful of trying to do is saying, well, it's actually, whilst I might have an opinion, what I've always wanted to do is express the opinion of the organisations that I represent. So it's not what I think. I'm trying always to poll and understand and say this is what we think.
You speak as the office, don't you? Not the man.
Yes, and you know I worked with City College on the Digitech factory and represented the tech community in the early stages of its planning and its design to say these are the things that the tech community want as outputs from that. So if you've got the funds to build it, then build it for the audience that will benefit from it. And then we were able to then curate a number of sort of sessions where we brought those tech partners in to say these are the skills that we need now, but potentially these are the skills we need in a few years' time. So the same principles really apply to the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor. But in addition to the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor, and it probably is because I do have a background. I've used technology all throughout my career. My T-shirt example will only be achieved through technology. So I'm turned on by it a bit. I get excited by it, and I can do geek, but also I can do the filter into the business community too. But I love it because I think there is so much interesting potential and current activity in that tech space that you need a bit of a lightning rod that points people to it, and a corridor like that is one of those mechanisms to do it. It's a branding mechanism. It's an identifier. It's exciting. It kind of does what it says on the tin. But there's a number of factors that come into effect to make it a success. One is the funding. One is the branding and the awareness. One is the availability of the infrastructure and the land around it. But the bit I'm really interested in is that sales pitch element of it. And what I want to be able to do is, rather than rely on a kind of if we build it, they will come approach, actually I want to take as much positivity from the tech corridor to the doors of organisations and say, if you're thinking about locating into different locations, locate here.
Yeah.
And specific, it's a bit like the T-shirt. I think you would do well here for all the right reasons. You should be here. And you're not sending the neg. You're not sending any kind of negative. You're not saying you may not have thought of Norfolk, or you may have thought this, or you may have thought that. None of that comes into play. If you're a particular organisation with a particular skill set that wants particular access and place for your employees to be, and ready access to a skilled labour force that ... then you need to be here.
Yeah.
So you can pitch it into the other Oxford, Cambridge arcs and various other longitudinal landing strips or whatever kind of mechanisms you want to give it. But I've got something I can sell.
Yeah.
And if you peel away the layers, there's a bit of a salesman in me without question. And then my first job was selling computers. So I love to be able to sell something which I think is of value and I think that works. So I really want to get into that bit, and we're in the early stages of it, because you've got to have that infrastructure, you've got to have that mechanism, you've got to have that money, you've got to have that brand. But the bit I really want to get to is the bit where I can go into those organisations, both locally and in the UK, and say, for all the right reasons, you need to be here, and actually be an ambassador of place as well as function. About, I built a successful entrepreneurial digital company in Norfolk without this. Think what you could do with it.
With it, yeah.
Those sorts of things.
I mean, and it's interesting. By the time people listen to this, not long before people listen to this, they'll have heard me talk to Sam Chapman-Allen, leader of Brecon Council, and you used exactly the same phrase that I put to him, with Thetford, because if you build it, will they come, or is it if they come then we'll build it? What way round is it going to work for the public sector? And his, you'll have to listen in to the broadcast to see what he said. And but I followed that up with an on-foot tour with the Greater Thetford Partnership, going around and being absolutely blown away by the scale of the offer in Thetford.
Yes.
And, you know, the potential, the location, the infrastructure, road, rail, Cambridge just down the road, realism about, you know, what that partnership with Cambridge might look like. But by the same token, how exciting. How exciting.
Haven't you skillfully taken us back to the start of this conversation?
If I have, it's due entirely to natural ability and in no way planned, because I like the ones where I do have a list of questions, but I prefer to just riff on them.
No, we'll riff on them, but it goes back to that starting point, which is the thing that I've found amazing throughout my time, is to be blown away by what's on your doorstep.
Exactly, yeah. The first time I saw the Priory in Thetford is a good example. I really hadn't grasped the magnitude of the site and the vision that was coming locally on the ground to say, these are the things we could do. And technology is a really good way of unpicking that. You talked earlier about MPs, and obviously I won't say biased, but interested is a better word. What's that like, and the importance of it sounds fairly self-explanatory. They're MPs. But what's that like to engage, and what do you want to see coming from those relationships? Obviously, faces change, possibly every 5 years. Some stay a lot longer. What do you want to get out of that relationship, not just as the Chamber, but also now as the Citizens Advice Bureau?
I think the approach that that I've taken and I will continue to take is, this is what good looks like. Can you help us enable it? I understand that MPs in their position and how they volunteer themselves to be MPs are expecting to listen and understand a number of challenges that are wide-ranging and varying across all sorts of spectrums. But I always try and bring a solution and say, this is the challenge, this is what we need, and this is how you can support it or enable it. I can't say I've had huge success with with it, but it has been quite difficult with Brexits and all sorts of things getting in the way. But let's assume that whatever normal is, we were normal. That it would have been I think better if I'd been able to spend more time having those kinds of conversations. But things have been busy, and focuses have always been around the now. And that's a bit of a challenge, I think, when we're dealing with MPs, is they understand where their policies are and where they're setting themselves out to do. And both those in power and those in opposition, you quite rightly talk the same narrative to everyone. It's not just it's not one message to one message to another. But I do feel that I do feel very strongly that the more we can enable MPs, with the hope that they are able to take some of those suggestions forward as align with their own policy or align with their own thinking, or even actually I need to think differently about something, then that's helpful. Otherwise, and this is what I tend to experience, we have the same conversation.
Yeah.
And that's to be expected if you're not necessarily just providing a solution. It's a bit different with infrastructure. I think infrastructure comes down to money.
Yes.
And where the money's going to come from, and how you can enable that fund. So roads and rail and it's obvious but nobody would disagree that we need to spend money on the infrastructure, on the rail infrastructure between Norwich and London.
Yeah. We
need to get rid of a 1.5 million year old rickety steel bridge that doesn't swing anymore in Norwich railway station.
Yes.
And we need to do more around the interchanges to enable goods trains to go at one speed and other trains. Nobody would disagree with that, but we don't seem to be able to find the money.
No.
And the same with roads. As relevant in the business community, it's the support that's needed for businesses to generally feel good about investing and therefore growing, particularly around things like productivity, because as wages rises, productivity's got to rise quicker. That's the challenge. But we're absolutely on in many organisations at the beginning conversations of understanding what productivity means, let alone sort of introducing it and applying it.
and countries around us have got a better march on us, really. So
Yeah.
we've got to do a lot quicker. So those things aren't necessarily as for want of a better word, as sexy for a politician as cutting a ribbon on something or pouring a bottle of beer on a rooftop. So they're harder to land, but I would say absolutely fundamental in any organisation is to understand how you can improve your productivity and do more for less.
Yeah.
If you're going to survive over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, even just doing something as daft as a podcast, you quickly find out where you are spending. If time's a resource, how you're spending more in going into every little mistake or in an interview when you're thinking it's perfectly fine, but you just want to get it perfect.
Yes.
And one of the things I tried to do very early on, which I'm going to reinstate for you personally for this one, is ask a bit of a left field question as I come towards the end of an interview. The voodoo vultures. You had to know that was coming at some point.
Taking the songs you love and vultures.
Now, what I wanted to ask was, if God forbid,
yes,
but if some zombie apocalypse or meteorite or alien invasion knocked out. I've never met them. I'm sure they're very fine artists in their own right. The rest of your band, who are your dream picks to reconstitute, like a pot noodle in sound, the Voodoo Vultures? Start with drums.
Start with drums. Okay. Start with drums. Okay. So I am interestingly, even though I sing in a crazy guitar-y based rock band, I'm a real fan of dub.
Right.
So there is a dub drummer for a band called Dreadzone, who he's unstoppable. He's like a machine, and he's probably twice my age now. I wish I could remember his name, Dr. Somebody or other. So I'd have to have a really serious, crazy dub beat drummer, and it would have to be him if I could remember his name.
Right.
It'll come back to me in a minute. But so he would be he would be the rhythm man, definitely.
He gets the call. Okay.
Gets the call.
Who's your next pick? Say, would it bass?
Yeah, bass. So it'd have to be back to the Japan link, Mick Kahn, the most gorgeous man in music.
Okay.
Who ruined many songs by playing bass fretlessly. So nobody wanted a fretless bass in their life. He decided that was the way forward. So he taught himself fretless bass, but he was a phenomenal bass player and the coolest man on the block. Always with a Jitong cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Perfectly groomed hair, chiseled features, upright, staring out into the crowd, that solemn kind of, constant metronome of a guitar player.
So fill the other positions, because I have not yet been to see.
Okay, so normally, if you're lucky, you can have two guitar players. So you'd have a lead guitar player and a rhythm guitar player. Your lead guitar player has got to be absolutely crazy and ultimately doesn't get past the age of 27 because of their lifestyle.
Right.
And I think that's probably best personified by Murdoch, who's the cartoon character in The Gorillas.
Ah, yes.
So
yes.
He is just terrifying to look at.
Yes,
and you
indeed.
wouldn't cross him.
No, you would not.
No, so I'd have a cartoon character as a guitar player.
Okay.
And rhythm guitar. Well, I've got two guitars at home and I can't play either of them, so I'd probably try and teach it myself. So I'd split myself in two.
Right.
And teach myself rhythm guitar as well.
And if you could go crazy and have someone on keyboards?
Dr. Flicks from Prince's band The Revolution. He always used to wear a full doctor's outfit, including a mask.
So
he's insane.
And I've got to ask this because it's just occurred to me. What's your opening number for the
you know, the Voodoo Vulture supergroup.
This is tricky. There are so many songs. There are so many songs. Anarchy in the UK.
There you are. There you are.
What other song could a disruptor have than Anarchy?
Well, Anarchy
Chaos
in the
and
UK.
Anarchy.
Well, my apologies to the other fine members of the Voodoo Vultures. I look forward to seeing them in action very soon. But Chris Sargisson, what a pleasure it's been.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for the
Thank
opportunity to talk to your lovely listeners.
No, it's my door is always open. If you can imagine a door in sound,
yes,
then that's always open.
Thank you.
And you have a platform whenever you need it, sir.
It would be good to come back and tell you how things are going.
I'd love to hear that.
And equally, if you have any particular kind of questions you think the Sarge might know, then yeah.
I had a crazy yearning to take, because you know these tend to be a one and done, but take what I've done and turn it into a magazine, the EP magazine, an e-zine once a quarter, and in my sort of my adult dream state when I start putting together the magazine like I used to do professionally many moons ago, you had a column. And we Sargisson's Old Peculiar, and I would invite you to write it, but
some random rumblings.
Some random rumblings.
But listen, I'm going to do something unorthodox to you. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Go on, then. No, this is great.
So, how many podcasts have you produced so far since you started this?
Ooh, I'm just in the middle of putting the final touches to episode 33.
Okay, so 33 people in. What are you picking up? What's your sense of the greatness of the region that we're in? What kind of common messages and words are you picking up at the moment? If you could knit them together with some words of wisdom and insight.
I think what it would be, definitely for me, is that we go back to what I said earlier about, and we both said earlier about people quietly doing business with the world, but being quite unsure of who we are as a region. Because the story almost that we're telling ourselves is incomplete. It's not full. It's not. I don't know. It's almost mythical in that it's not really reflecting the truth as I find it on the ground. You go to places like Essex, the University of Essex, Colchester, Idea Space in Cambridge, the Food Enterprise Park, Haverhill, the Epicentre. I'm just pulling names out from my memory, but lots and lots. Fuel Studios, Axela, lots of places, and you know. Some of them say, do you come out this far? Some of them say, we really want to reach out to the rest of our region. And I think it's a region that really wants to tell a new story about itself. To say, it's not about when Cambridge wins, everyone knows that Cambridge gets all the goodies and we get... No. It's not a zero-sum game. When Cambridge gets the goodies, there's opportunity. There's always an opportunity. There's always something that we can work together and find out new stuff, work out new stuff, and really start making progress. One of my dreams is really to write a book, why the East of England will save the world. And look at everything from energy to food to science. Oh, it's all in there. It's all fantastic stuff. And that is really it. The fact that there's a new story to tell ourselves, but we just haven't written it yet completely.
Right. So you're going to have a dinner party, and the invitation says, come and help East Anglia save the world. And you're going to invite 4 people, living or dead, that you regard as the best brains that would actually be able to solve that conundrum. Who would be on your invite list? And what would be on the menu?
Oh, dearie me. Well, yourself, that's definitely number one off the bat. I have to say that because just, you know, A, you're here, and B, it's inspired. It's been a very inspiring conversation. And you've bought me a pint, which is critical. The other 3. Now, this is one of those occasions where I'm going to have to edit this down for lengthy pauses and thinking.
Yeah.
I think I would... I'd get a ringer. I'd pick up the phone to David Parfrey and get him back. Whether we, you know, drag him back to Norfolk.
Science Santa, as I used to call it.
Yes, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary for the East of England in the southwest. So get him back. The other 2.
Living or dead, doesn't matter.
Living or dead. Well, I don't.
Let's go with living, actually.
Let's go living. I mean, I don't know, the only one dead I can think of at the moment is occurs to me is Julian of Norwich, but I think she's not really a dinner party kind of gal.
We'd have to say Grace, wouldn't we?
We'd have to say Grace. And I think it would probably have to be, this is a very boring choice, not a boring person, but it's a bit predictable on my part, is Saul Humphrey, because I think he's such a powerful voice on sustainability at the moment. And the other one, Ros Bird from the Anglia Innovation Partnerships and the Norwich Research Park, because when I met her, there was someone who was just fizzing with ideas, who knew where things needed to be changed, and I was just itching to get at it. Dave Martin at Condimentum, the CEO of Condimentum, because he's living proof, I think, that the East of England can bring in the best from across the world. And what would be on the menu? God, I don't know. As long as I'm not cooking it, anything you like. I do a very fine line in carbon.
Really?
Yes, I do very...
You've not got a signature dish?
Bucket. Signature bucket. No, because I'm a terrible cook. I'm an absolutely dreadful cook because I live with ADD. I get distracted so very easily. So the raw, burnt. My daddy's going to cook tonight. Oh no, really? Can we get takeaway? I'm going to pass on that one. Right. I'd get someone else to worry about that, or possibly get a room in a restaurant somewhere in Norwich, and we'll do it there. But I slightly bent the terms of your question there by having 5, but
that's fine. 5 is good. No, you could keep going. You could keep going.
A bigger table, yeah. Oh, Anne Leach. Mustn't forget Anne Leach. My friend Anne Leach used to run the Spire Hospital in Norwich. Now chair of Starston Parish Council. Right. Phenomenal person.
Well, hey, if all these people actually do really exist...
They do. I didn't just make them up.
There we go. Why don't we do it?
Let's do it. Do you know,
I'll cook.
OK, there you go. Well, you heard it here first, folks. You know, one of my dreams is actually to do an awards ceremony in Thetford Forest, under the trees. In summer, obviously, with lights and...
So you win an award, then get eaten by a wolf.
That's it. That's it. The wolf cleans up for you. You know, it's the circle of life, my friends.
Excellent.
Oh, thank you ever so much.
Pleasure.
I'm not really bothered if it's recorded anymore, probably because I'm halfway down the beer. It's just too much fun. Thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure.
My huge thanks to Chris for a truly fun evening. And if you're feeling left out of my list of top dinner guests, I am truly sorry. But Chris did give me an excellent idea for which you will want to stand by. Because it gives me no small sense of satisfaction to say that Eastern Promise is growing. Both my 6 and 12-month targets have been hit 2 months early in each case, and the Eastern Promise audience, both inside and outside the UK, continues to grow, particularly in the USA. I'm looking to build bespoke partnerships to take Eastern Promise further. Audio is an incredibly flexible medium. However, the real strength of Eastern Promise is in its brand as a beacon of belief in the East of England. Belief in the region's collective potential, in the unique opportunity our region presents. It's by sharing the amazing news about what we have that the East of England can achieve sustainable, values-based growth. If you believe that too and want to know more, please do get in touch. You can DM me, Mike Rigby, via LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Just search for my name and then click on the one that looks like a potato wearing a blue jacket. Alternatively, you can email me at host@easternpromise.site. That's site as in website, not as in eyesight. I look forward to hearing from you soon. In early September, the department store Selfridges announced that it wants half of its transactions to be resale, rental or refills by 2030 in response to customer demand for more sustainable shopping. That's a positive step, to be sure, but some in the East of England want to go higher, further, faster. Meet GreenR, the platform that aims to make shopping sustainably so much easier. GreenR offers a one-stop shop for planet-friendly products and aims to take the stress out of shopping in an eco-conscious way by eliminating the jargon and taking the paint pots away from would-be greenwashers. I asked co-founder and CEO of GreenR, Thomas Panton, to tell me more.
Yeah, greenr.co.uk is a marketplace for sustainable products made by companies that care. We are bringing, more transparency, accessibility and affordability to that market than ever before, because as you'll be well aware, shopping sustainably has not always been easy, and it still is confusing and murky waters. So our whole mission is to make that, more accessible to more people ultimately. And I think if one thing we've found, over the last year and a half of sort of putting the research into this, is that consumers are really asking for it, right? So ethical consumerism has grown 1,000% in the last 20 years compared to household spending just increasing by 2%. So you can absolutely see there's a demand for it, but yet there's still confusion how to do it. And that's where we come in, and that's what we're bringing to consumers at the end of this summer.
You've certainly coming this at a really good time, because as you say, there is a lot of interest. We've seen a lot of moves towards this over the years. So there's a lot of interest in actually making a real difference. I mean, we are sitting having this interview in one of, if not the hottest day of the year, certainly top 5. So there's going to be a renewed interest in climate change, I think. There are fewer and fewer people who are just thinking of it as a nice sunny day and more like, is this what's going to be the shape of things to come? So you're picking a fantastic moment, I think, to go on the market. Tell us more about that, the journey to the idea, and because you're spin out from the University of East Anglia. So what's that experience like as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long one to get here, really. So all 3 of us co-founders come from UEA. We did our undergrad, so I'm doing a master's there. But it wasn't through UEA that we sort of started GreenR originally. So really my background was I did my undergrad and worked for Greenpeace, the environmental organization, for just over 4 years. I worked predominantly engaging thousands of people into the climate movement, regardless of whether they were, eco warriors, or whether they were, just your average person who, understands that there's a problem, but doesn't necessarily want to have to change their whole lives to, tackle that issue. And Greenpeace are really good at that because it's just a pressure group which you can support, and they do that heavy lifting. And that really resonates with people. During my time with Greenpeace, I worked a lot of events, predominantly festivals over the summer. And I mean, as we've all seen across various sort of papers and articles, there's a really huge amount of waste that is left at festivals, and it's a real problem that they're trying to tackle, one of those being tents. So in the UK alone, about 250,000 tents end up in landfill every single year, and actually only about 2% of tents are collected at the end of festivals. And most people think that they are collected by charities, but that just doesn't happen. Only about 1 or 2% does every year. So I actually left Greenpeace to set up my first company, which was specifically contracted to collect those tents and repurpose, recycle, or reuse them ultimately. Wow. Which was fantastic. I actually didn't utilize the UEA enterprise system as much as I definitely should have at that time. And, despite being at the university still and being integrated in there, but I did learn a lot. So, being a solo founder then, and having to navigate the treacherous startup sea, I had to sort of learn quite quickly how to manage things. And we managed a team of 30 people at its biggest, and was really successful. But then something called the COVID pandemic came, and there were no festivals and no events, which sort of put me in a sticky position as a founder, but also my team. And I think we had to make a really difficult decision that we couldn't wait because we didn't know quite how long this was going to last. But what we could do was learn from what we'd done and learn from who we talked to. And, we'd spoken to hundreds of businesses who were making better products, who were ethical in their nature, in their foundations. We'd spoken again to thousands of people who were begging for these better products, but really didn't know where to find them outside of that scenario. So, the instant thought for me was, well, why don't we give them that access? We've already made those connections with businesses. We've got lots of consumers we know wanting it. Let's pair them together. So straight out of that, really, is when we got involved with UEA to initially start speaking to them. I brought on my co-founder, Hugo, who was at UEA with me, but is also a friend and a band member, and we've done lots of stuff together. That's another story for another time. But, and very quickly we realized there was a gap in the market. We realized that UEA could help fund through grants and through mentorship. And that was really, really beneficial going into a new sector. And even though we had lots of experience, which was transferable, we definitely needed that mentorship going through that early stage R&D phase. And then we brought on our third co-founder and subsequently have been awarded 2 of the grants from UEA, and they're investing into our current investment round, which is open at the moment. So, they've been fantastic. But I think, as with any of these sort of mentorship areas that you can go and get advice, you sort of take what you need and you balance that, because not everything's going to be relevant to you, right? And that's where we are now. So with their support, with their, with various funding and awards, we're now bringing it to life.
So that's really interesting. How do you tell? I suppose a lot of it has to do with your previous experience pre-pandemic, but how do you tell which parts of the offer from the UEA enterprise services are going to be relevant, or is it just experience?
I think that's a really good question. I don't think you know until you go and speak with them. Firstly, like I said, with the original company, I didn't use them at all when I should have, and that meant that my first experiences with them were sort of going into it unknown, not really knowing what they were going to offer. And I think, look, they're a really great place to get that early stage startup advice, access to early stage funding if you've got a really good idea and you can back that up with research. And you have to put the work in as an individual. They're not just going to, give you handouts, but they will mentor you to get there. And I think how you choose what is relevant, and this is just across all advice, right? It's not just from UEA. This could be from an investor, an advisor, a fellow founder, you and me having a chat. Like, everyone knows something you don't, but ultimately it's your baby, right? Your business, your idea. You're the one who's been working on that for however many years, and you can gauge quite quickly what is relevant and what is helpful but not really relevant to you. You also will make mistakes. Like, we've taken advice, and then not from UEA actually, but from other places, and then been like, probably shouldn't have done that. But it's fine. Like, so long as it's not a major thing, you can keep chugging along. And I think that's just being a startup, right? Even if you are super, super experienced in your sector, which we are with climate and sustainability and consumerism, you still are going to find slightly rocky roads at certain points. But that's when those places where you can go and get advice could be really helpful, and UEA have been one of those.
In terms of, you said your investment round is currently open, and we had Gary Douglas-Beat of Innovate UK Edge on a co-production I did with the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor, and he was an absolute fountain of knowledge about how to seek investment, where to go for investment, and I just wanted to get a sense from you of how you're finding this experience of kind of putting yourself out there and showing your wares, as it were, of GreenR.co.uk and what you can offer. How has that been, and what is it like to keep up your morale?
I think that's a really good question. Difficult to answer. I think there's a couple of things I'd mention here. None of my co-founders and I come from a family net of money, right? And that's quite rare for founders a lot of the time. Obviously, you hear those stories of founders who came from nothing and built themselves up, and but often there is that support, and Jeff Bezos is a great example. He got $250,000 from his parents as a sort of loan to get started. Wouldn't that be the dream if my parents could give me that sort of money to get me started? You know, it just doesn't happen to a lot of us. So for us, it was really about working out what is relevant to us. Firstly, there's lots of avenues, right? You could put your own money in if you've got savings. You could get grants, like Innovate grants, for example. You could go to your university and ask if they can offer any funding or avenues to funding, or you can raise investment, or you can go down debt financing, right? So loans and stuff. Now, we've sort of taken a mix of those, and I think our experience is that equity fundraising isn't for everyone. It really depends on what type of business you're building. You know, we're building a platform which we envision being the future of shopping, right? You know, we're not building the Amazon of today, we're building the Amazon of tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're giving consumers access to live and shop sustainably en masse with less impact over time, and that market's growing. So for us, it makes absolute sense to fundraise, and get the added value at, the value add of investors and advisors and institutions. Also with grants, the difficulty is that often they're very niche. So we've had to balance this quite a lot. So we're a marketplace, but we bring in innovative tech into the back end of this. You know, we're the first multi-vendor marketplace in the UK to have an impact calculator built in, which we've built, which tells you how much carbon emissions, water and plastic you save when you buy these products compared to their mainstream alternatives. Now, that's quite new and that's quite techy and innovative, but because we're a marketplace, we're not always eligible for grants because it's consumer shopping. That's ultimately what the top level is. And that's a really hard balance, right? And you've got to make sure that if you are pitching for grants, that you do fit into their thesis. Otherwise, it's just absolutely no point. In terms of morale, I think ultimately, look, I predominantly lead the investment reach out, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm good at talking. I probably like my voice a bit too much. But secondly, I've done this for other organizations, right? So with Greenpeace, I started as a fundraiser. I started with having door after door shut in my face, even though we knew we were doing a brilliant, fantastic thing, which would help ultimately save the planet. And these people didn't really need to support by much to get on board with that movement. And that's quite hard, right? To take that and try and navigate your morale through that. But what it does do is give you a pretty thick skin so that when you are doing that in other scenarios, you aren't beaten down. That's not to say it's not hard. This is our baby. We've come up with it. We've built it. We've put the time, the sweat, the tears, the sleepless nights in. And when an investor turns around and goes, I just don't think you're good enough, that's a really hard thing to hear, right? But equally, there are other people who really believe in us. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how many no's you've had. That one yes, whether it's £1,000, whether it's £100,000, it's really validating and really fulfilling and can just completely wipe out that lack of morale if you are feeling that. So I think, you have to be thick-skinned. You have to know that it's right for you. But you also have to be aware that it might feel rocky, but it's an upward trajectory a lot of the time, right? It's a hard mountain to climb, but it's still going up. And that's really exciting.
That's a very good way of looking at it. Hard mountain, but it's all in the ascent, as it were. So talk me through the experience of somebody coming to the GreenR.co.uk platform. What is their experience going to be like?
Yeah, no, really important as well, because we're not building the traditional marketplace that has sort of been out there already. We're going a bit deeper and further into engagement and learning and social aspects as well. So at the very top level, if you came to the GreenR.co.uk homepage, it's a shopping site. You can search, see the different departments and you can go through and click on products. But everything behind that is there that if you want to read more about the transparency, about the way we vet, about us as a business, about the brands, about the different labels they have, all of that work, that heavy lifting has been done. So ultimately, you can spend as much or as little time on that platform as you want, but you will find what you're looking for to make you feel comfortable that this is a product which is better for the planet, people, and your pocket ultimately as well. So really that splits into three different areas. You've sort of got the direct shopping platform, and then you've got the learn side of that platform. So that goes through everything from, how we vet the difference in labels and why those labels are better. Why is a vegan product better than a non-vegan product, for example? And a lot of people don't really know that. They just hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we can give you sort of the backing, the really digestible information if you want it. And then I think the third thing is, we're very aware that with consumerism, often you just want a quick purchase, right? So for us, we've built in that capability to do that. But also when you get to checkout and when you or your basket, you are still able to see that impact data that I talked about earlier with carbon emissions, water and plastic. So when you get there, you can engage with that, and later down the line, we'll sort of gamify that a little bit as well. Like, you can use that data to play games, earn points, spend those points. And that really encourages that positive reinforcement on what you're buying, but also keeps people there. And that's really important because there are some great sustainable marketplaces out there that have laid the foundation for sustainable shopping. But one thing that is really missing is that engagement with a wider audience. And often that comes down to accessibility, transparency, and a good brand. And I think what we've really focused on is that when we go live, we've put the work in so that when you go on the platform, yes, you can just shop, but also there's so much more that you're getting out of our business than just that. And that's really important.
Are you looking at just individual consumers and families at this point, or are you looking as well at, or will be looking as well at bulk purchases like businesses in the public sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So to begin with, it's just the individual consumer, although there's no reason why you couldn't bulk purchase, but it probably wouldn't be the most cost-effective way of buying those products on bulk. But there are absolute plans to build into a sort of B2B wholesale platform in the back end of that. It's not something we're launching with, but it's always been in the roadmap. And the reason for that, and I mean, as you probably know from asking this question, is that individuals can make changes, we can change how we shop, but I'm a massive believer that it shouldn't just be down to the individual to save the planet. I think that businesses and governments are the ones that need to change the most. And ultimately, if we can provide a place for them to make better purchase decisions as well, then ultimately we're tackling a much bigger problem as well, which isn't just individual consumerism. It's, it's whole sectors, and that's really exciting. And look, we've built the foundations to do that, right? All the tech's there, the tech stack's behind it. All we need to do is make sure that we've got enough vendors who sell wholesale to sort of be able to accommodate those sorts of orders.
There's a perception, and I honestly don't have any data to tell you whether this is fair or not, but I think there is definitely a perception that at this precise moment in time, where we are in July of 2022, that most people are focused on, not to engage in hyperbole, but survival in terms of, eking out what they can afford and putting sustainability on a lower rung of the priority ladder. Now, I'm not 100% sure that that's necessarily true and certainly in all cases. It may be for some at the very sort of extreme end of the socioeconomic scale. But what's your view about how we can stop that narrative that, oh, we don't have time for this green stuff? We don't have time, we don't have money. People aren't worried about that right now because, as I'm sure you'll agree, and I know a lot of people listening to this program will agree, that the planet really doesn't give a hoot about what socioeconomic, one of its most meddlesome creations is getting up to.
No, it's a really, really important question, and a pretty big question as well. So I'll try and keep this succinct. But look, we are going for an economic downturn. There's no denying it. Whether that is because of bad decisions from sort of banks and leadership, or whether it's to do with sort of political crises, in Europe and beyond, ultimately it is happening. And that means, particularly with energy and how much we have to spend there are things which get sacrificed. Now, again, I don't know the exact numbers, but sustainability always stays pretty high on consumers' sort of awareness scope, I guess, if you want to call it that. But you're absolutely right. It does drop down when something like this happens, but not much lower, right? It's still up there because we still understand that this is a problem. The weather tells us this, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not, we might be like, oh, great, sunny weather, I can get a tan. But also we all sort of know deep down, this is a real problem, right? The UK shouldn't be this hot at this time consistently.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have heat waves, more and more frequently. Like it's just completely unnatural for us.
Yeah.
So we're all aware of that. And I think that there's no avoiding those hard truths. However, again, that doesn't stop the fact that our wallets are lighter at the moment. So there's a couple of things here which are really important to note. One is we've really focused on trying to bring an affordability aspect to what we're providing. Traditionally, sustainable shopping has been in sort of two sectors. One is they are good products, but they're quite expensive, luxury price point, or they're affordable and relatively cheap, but they're not very good products and they break very quickly and they're sort of from a certain stereotype which may or may not be true. Now, that has drastically changed over the last decade, particularly over the last few years, where now we're seeing sort of supermarket brands being sustainable products. So, Wild Cosmetics, one of the brands that we've signed up, they're a little bit more expensive than your average deodorant. However, they're a refillable. They last longer. They care about people, planet, and your pocket. So over the long run, you're saving money. You're also saving the planet, and you're caring about people that are making that product. So there are various different incentives there for you to spend a little bit more upfront, but actually save over the longer run. And that's often the same now with refillables and reusables, is that yes, it might be more expensive from purchase one, and I know that doesn't help for people at the lower end of the sort of bracket, but these things, again, are still improving. The prices are coming down, but ultimately it's that initial purchase, and then actually it's much more affordable going forward than just buying the same toothbrush over and a plastic toothbrush over and over again, or whatever it might be. For us, I think what's really important is that we're transparent about it. There's a big aspect of positive reinforcement in what you're buying. Mm-hmm. We're not telling you to buy things that you don't necessarily need. We are big advocates for circular economy. So if you don't need to buy it new, don't buy it new, which can often make it cheaper. But some things you have to buy new: cleaning products, cosmetics, body wash. These things you can't buy secondhand. I'd like to see anyone try. And in that circumstance, we can make positive decisions, sustainable decisions, which actually don't affect our price, our wallets, as much as we may think they used to. And there are some fantastic cleaning products on our platform which are the same price as their mainstream counterparts, and they're refillable. So actually you're saving a hell of a lot of money by buying those products over time. It's still a decision. We're not saying it's easy. There is a certain amount of education that comes with that, but we have done as much of that heavy lifting as we possibly can to just make it as accessible and affordable to individuals. I think some things will, the whole economy is going to take a hit, but economies recover. And as you say, the climate doesn't wait. So, we can't, we can slow down as individuals, maybe our purchase power, but ultimately, as you say, when it comes to sort of governments and businesses, we absolutely still need to be making big changes as we go forward. We can't be swayed by what's happening here, particularly as businesses, I think. And that's really, something that will become clear through purpose-driven businesses, which are becoming more and more common.
Yeah. Are you going to have such a thing as rating star systems on your products, or are you leaving that for others?
No. So we're not trying to actively, promote a product more than its counterparts in the same sector. We vet products so that whatever you buy on our platform, you're buying better. We have a phrase which is better, not best. And the reason of that is everything has an impact. So if you're on our platform and one product has the most glorified environmental credentials, but it's actually a bit out of your price range, but still on our website, you find one which is still a better product, but is just a bit more affordable, buy that one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not trying to tell you to buy the absolute most luxury price pointed product on our platform because it's the best environmentally. We're just trying to say, look, we can all be a little bit better in what we purchase. And if that's affordable to you, then that's still great. There's a reason we rigorously vet brands and their products, because we want you to have that choice, no matter what your bank account balance says, ultimately.
Now, I've got to tip my hat at this point to the Anthropocene website. I read an article that talks about the business and entrepreneurship researchers are increasingly interested in moral markets, where businesses offer market-based solutions to social environmental problems. Now, to keep this kind of canter through what the website says as brief as possible, the upshot is that they were looking at how green and eco startups fare in cultures that are predominantly strongly market facing, strongly environmental positive. And I'm thinking about sort of places in Germany, for example, some of the German states. And they found that it's where those two cultures meet. So you have both things together. Again, the example they give is the Western US, California. The eco businesses do the best they can. There's less, the competition is on very much on a level playing field, but they're not sort of getting blitzed out of the water by sort of competition from other areas. What's your view of a moral market, and where would you, I suppose, place both the UK and the east of England on that score?
It's a really interesting question, and I think that it comes down to that, what I was saying earlier with accessibility with sustainability. You can't really have one without the other. My co-founder Hugo did some really great customer segmentation, like breaking down different sort of customer groups or individuals across the UK, and their purchase power to their intent versus what they focus on. And what's really interesting is that the really hardcore eco warriors are often very loud about needing to shop sustainably and change our habits, but often can't necessarily afford to do those more expensive price points. And then the people with sort of middle intent, but maybe more capital, are actually the ones spending the most money in the sector. I think that you have to balance that, and you have to balance what the market demands and what the planet needs. I think that the East of England does pretty well on it. I mean, we did break down by city sort of intent to shop sustainably. And, you've got the sort of ones which you'd expect to come up, like Bristol, Brighton, and that sort of fluctuates across the UK. But overall, the UK is doing surprisingly well compared to other places. I mean, the ethical consumer market is worth £121 billion in the UK. That's more than Europe. Not in total, but through ratio, we're actually much higher than a lot of other places. So as individuals, our market and our focus on sustainability are becoming more aligned. They are becoming crossover, which means that the UK is a really great place for sustainable businesses to boom, and also just in other sectors as well, like tech investment. I was at a Google for Startups and Tech Nation event a month or so ago, and it was looking at a decade of UK tech. And actually, obviously, Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, dominate sort of investment into tech. But actually, the UK has been doing surprisingly well across the rest of the world. And that's really exciting, particularly for innovative small businesses. Now, tie that with our incentive to shop morally. That's a massive market for us to lead the way to sort of ethical business, or these moral markets, as you may call them. And I think that particularly in the east of England, we've got two universities here, one of which is world leading in its climate research. There's a lot of incentive and evidence for the region to sort of lead that way as well. I do think there's a disconnect between the city, the universities, and the rest of Norfolk and east of England. And I think that needs to be reconnected personally. I think that there are some fantastic things happening outside of the city. There are some great companies. SOP is an ethical business based in Norfolk. They're not in the city directly. And I think that if we just reach out a little bit wider as a market, we can actually engage more people than you previously would have expected to in the area. I think the east of England has a lot of promise there. And I really am sort of hopeful that local governments and local businesses can lead that way a little bit Obviously, there are restrictions when it comes down to what you get from Central, but that is a conversation again for a different time, perhaps. But yeah, so I think that there is a crossover. I think the UK is doing well compared to the sort of rest of Europe, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's coming from government. I think that is predominantly led by innovative startups and people. People are demanding it, and people are starting it.
One of the things I actually particularly love about the East of England, and I'm not saying this is a unique thing, but it's something that occurs to me very much, certainly doing this podcast, is the extent to which people in the East of England, businesses in the East of England, institutions don't wait for permission. And particularly, I'm thinking, people like yourselves in the academic and the private sectors, they really crack on to see what they can do without necessarily having to go and knock on the doors of number 11 Downing Street, or the Department for Levelling Up, or whoever it may be. And I think that's to be greatly admired. And I think in many ways that is a bigger draw for investment than the, what I like to very dismissively call the Oliver Twist approach, which I worry is a bit easy for any place, any organisation to fall back on, to think, well, this is our due and we shall go down to London and hold out our caps and ask for more, which they hear, like, how many thousands of times a month, how many hundreds of times a week, that, bang, 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 we need more money, and they just roll their eyes and carry on. Whereas if, part of my reason for doing this is if we can, a big reason for my doing this is if we create the narrative of success, as you're doing very much, we create the narrative of positive engagement, success, it will drive that forward rather than arms folded, these are all the things we don't have and we want. Well, that's lovely. One thing...
look, some of the biggest brands have come out of Norfolk. Coleman's, Barclays started here. Whether these brands are ethical brands doesn't really matter. The fact is they have gone on to become world leading and well known. And I think that when I first came to university in Norfolk in 2014, I was shocked at how hard it was to get here. One single road all the way from Oxfordshire to Norfolk, pretty much. The trains had been stopped. There was no longer a train line from Oxford to Cambridge, and then getting to Cambridge to Norwich was difficult on road. Even to London, the trains were often cancelled. There were alternative bus routes. And yet, over the last decade, that has drastically changed to the point where we have so much more accessibility, possibly aided by the fact that remote and hybrid working has sort of grown, and people have flocked away from big hubs like London and come to places like Norwich and Norfolk to restart and rebuild in different areas. And that's really promising. And again, when I went to this Google event, what was the little city that was mentioned at the end of a list of fantastically big cities in the UK? Norwich was mentioned. And I was like, this is fantastic. East of England is leading the way. We're quiet, but we can definitely be louder. And this is why we're here, right? We could have chosen to go to London and set up and have access to all the big institutions in London and be able to knock on the investment banker's door or whatever. But look, Norfolk is a place where we honestly believe can lead the way with the future of shopping particularly, but also just generally with industry. And we'd love to stay here and keep that sort of growth happening and bring another great brand out of the region, and more attention to the region as well.
Yeah. So you're slightly covering off my next question, which is, so what does the future hold for GreenR? Where's your have you got sort of early plans for expansion, or is it very much let's get through this period of investment?
No, we have pretty ambitious plans.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I think we're sensible. We know what we can achieve in the time and the capital that we've got, and that we're raising. And this raise right now for our launch allows us to, really focus on the UK for brands that are distributing in the UK to UK consumers. We're based in Norfolk. We'll be employing people in the region and really, nail that down. when we raise again and go to growth, we have huge plans for this. So there's not only plans to expand to Europe and bring in sort of the same model in their most sustainable countries. So the Nordics, Germany was mentioned, Portugal and Spain as well. And then further expand from there, but also bring in other features as well, right? Like one of the big things which people are so used to, and personally I think again shouldn't have to sacrifice, is getting their products that they've bought quite quickly. And Amazon have done a smashing job at this, but they've had a really damaging impact on the planet by doing this. Plus the fact that they, just destroy hundreds of thousands of products every week when they're returned. But anyway, but what we'd really like to do is bring in zero emission, same day or next day delivery over, within 18 months. And the reason for this is we can do it in a really smart and efficient way by having miniature urban distribution centers, partnering with people like Zedify, for example, and then getting products to people in the time frame that they want, but still focused on having less of an impact, still focused on buying sustainably, and still focused on the future of shopping rather than the past. And I think that we are positioning ourselves to do that very well. And it really is our hunger and ambition that will drive that growth. But like I said, we're raising now so that we can do the first 12 months and get started and build a foundation of customers. Unless that happens, all of this is just waffle.
It certainly is not. I have every confidence because it's a fantastic plan. It's a beautiful brand. I wish you every success. Thomas, thank you very much for being on Eastern Promise today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to the abundant Thomas Panton for speaking to me. To find out more about GreenR and their current crowdfunding phase, visit greenr.co.uk/crowdfund. Swallows, saplings, squirrels. Ow! These things abound in nature, whose breathtaking wonders sometimes feel almost commonplace in the beauty of the east of England. But where in our region should you go to experience the soothing embrace of Mother Nature? Time for a spell of...
Crowdsourcery.
Let's make like an acorn in autumn and not hang about. Ow! Straight out of the blocks, Minsmere is the vote of Tom Abbott of GreenR. Jack Weaver, meanwhile, Greater Thetford Partnership Manager at Breckland Council, drops the needle on what he says is a broken record, but what I maintain is a timeless classic. Thetford Forest. 19,000 hectares of plantation, the largest man-made forest in the country. The Little Ouse and the Thet Rivers. The entire Brecks landscape, says Jack, full stop. Thetford serves in spades that primal need to be near trees and water. It's got its own forest and 2 rivers, for goodness sake, says Jack. He does go on to give honourable mention to his childhood home, Mersey Island in Essex. Dr. Mark Eastwood, Director of Internal Audit at ARM in Cambridgeshire, writes, Kelling Heath is just gorgeous. But then he admits he's terribly biased as he owns a home on the Heath. It's the place where Dr. Eastwood recharges and finds peace. Well, I have to say, Mark, I agree with you completely there. A huge favourite of my family. My daughter loves feeding the sheep on the viewing point overlooking the railway and the sea. This year is the first year we haven't been in ages, and we truly miss it. A glorious view and a great choice, Mark. Neil Griffin, Innovation Director at the Innovation Centre Knowledge Gateway at the University of Essex, likes Tunstall and Rendlesham forests, but his favourite place to get out and walk is Sutton Heath. I'm afraid I know neither Tunstall nor Rendlesham yet, but I think I soon will. Genial gentleman of business Brian Bush, solutionist, advocate, connector. Thetford Forest always settles me, and also the lovely beach at Cothhive. Brian, Thetford Forest, again, does exactly the same for me, and I think you and Jack have very much in common there. Richard Ross of Beyond Wealth Management writes, "We're spoilt for choice in Norfolk." Very true. "But a firm favourite is Tyrrell's Wood, just off the A140 near Pulham Market. It is simply magical," says Richard. "And the woodland folk even decorate it at Christmas time if you have small children, or even soppy big ones." Thank you, Richard. After 15 years of working in South Norfolk, I've still never come across Tyrrell's Wood. Every day's a school day. Amy Wright, Event Account Manager at Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. "One of my favourite walks," says Amy, "is West Harling Woods, with a stop-off for coffee at Thorpe Lodges." Amy, you've mentioned one of my favourite words. That's coffee, not walk. I must find out about Thorpe Lodges, though, which admittedly is not why we're here, but it's my show. Richard Powell, OBE, Environmental Charity Advisor and Independent Chair. Richard says, "I've been lucky in my job to have been to some stunning places and project managed the creation of many. I love RSPB Lakenheath Fen, Wolveswood near Hadley in Suffolk, Captain's Wood, Suffolk for bluebells, Strumpshaw Fen and the fabulous Burney Marshes." I could go on, says Richard, but he adds, "Solace comes on Overstrand Beach in autumn and winter." Do you know, it's funny the number of people in our region who really, really love being at our coast towards the end of the year, and the raw primal power of the ocean battering up against the shore. And the best place to watch that from is undoubtedly in a nice warm cafe on the seafront. Thank you all for those brilliant contributions. I can't declare a winner. We're all winners, having so much natural wonder on our doorsteps. Next week... Yes, I want to know about your favourite independent shop. Butcher, baker, candlestick maker, high street, city centre, or in the heart of the village. Look out for the next spell of CROWDSOURCERY on LinkedIn and let me have your recommendations. And that's all from episode 36 of Eastern Promise. Next week, we're off to Cambridge to visit Ideaspace, a community of founders and entrepreneurs based at 3 sites across the city. I'll be chatting to Ideaspace MD Benjamin Hartley, visiting 2 of the 3 sites, which I can honestly say confounded my every expectation about Cambridge and its innovation ecosystem. But what it did do is a huge amount to make me optimistic and excited about the future of our region. Wherever you're listening from, please do tune in. It only remains for me to thank Chris Sargisson once more for sharing his experience, knowledge, ideas, and for buying me a beer. Thank you too to green shopping guru Thomas Panton for taking us through the GreenR story. A special thank you to Claire Haynes, Michelle Chambers and Simon Hughes for coming to see me take part in the Men's Craft Men's Laugh Comedy Showcase in Norwich last week. It really was very much appreciated. Thank you too to the Pharaoh of the frequencies, Engineer 49, currently laid low with COVID. Get well soon. To all my crowdsourcerers, and to you for listening, thank you. I'll be back next week. Yeah, I will. Until then, bye for now. Have you noticed that I put in a different little zinger every week? You must watch these points.